So picture this. An American novel becomes a French satire, and almost 3 decades later, a Korean auteur turns it into one of the funniest, bleakest movies of the year. That's not just the effects of the movie industry's full globalization, but the best description of Park Chan-wook's latest dark satire, and probably the best argument you'll hear this year why LinkedIn should be banned. So, why should you watch this strange mix of thriller, comedy, and tale about humanity? Well, that's what I'll try to answer in this video. I'm Peter from Vinyl N Celluloid, and this is my review of No Other Choice.
I was looking for a job and then I found a job, and heaven knows I'm miserable now. In my
So, unless you've been living under a rock or completely cut off social media, and if that's the case, I envy you, there's simply no denying that for the last 13 years, South Korea has rose to become a major mainstream pop culture exporter. No Other Choice, the most recent work helmed by the man behind iconic entries such as Old Boy, The Handmaiden, Lady Vengeance, and Decision to Leave, is yet another example of the global rise known as Hallyu, or the Korean Wave. The film's international anticipation, critical reviews in Western media, and festival circuit prominence exemplify how South Korean cinema has become a powerful force in mainstream culture. And perhaps it's the relatability of these stories and overall outputs combined with the land of mourning calm savoir-faire for tackling absurdity that justify their popularity. And yet, for all the comparisons the movie will receive to Bong Joon-ho's 2019 hit Parasite and the American release Sorry to Bother You, anyone expecting more of the same will be disappointed, because this is a very different film. In fact, an entirely different experience altogether. This is a title that actually works as a companion piece to the iconic cult TV show of the 90s, Prophet, in the sense that these assess two sides of the Machiavellian psyche. The Korean movie uses it to fight desperation and societal pressure, whilst the American TV series used it as a tool for blind ambition. However, both yield the same effects. But before I share more on the greatness of No Other Choice, let's go over the usual recap section, shall we? Yoo Man-soo, played by Lee Byung-hun, is a middle-aged paper mill manager who is abruptly fired after decades of loyal service. As mass layoffs sweep the industry, Man-soo finds himself struggling to hold his family together whilst enduring humiliating job interviews and mounting financial strain. Desperate to reclaim his self-worth and way of life, Man-soo becomes obsessed with securing a rare job opening at a rival paper company. Upon discovering that several candidates are better qualified, Man-soo decides there is no other choice but to eliminate his competition. What begins as botched attempts at murder escalates into a tragic comedy spiral of violence as he aims to secure the role. Now, on the surface, this is a simple story. The laid-off man pushed too far. Underneath lies something we've all been living, the slow collapse of professional identity. When the system starts treating people like products, eventually someone takes the marketing too literally. The director turns that quiet panic into a social autopsy. He's not preaching about capitalism or class. He's tracing how politeness mutates into self-preservation. It's the kind of movie that starts as a comedy and ends as a confession, not about crime, but about how much of ourselves we've already outsourced to work. So with that in mind, let's look at the four angles that made No Other Choice one of the sharpest films of the year. For starters, we have the film's nuanced cross-cultural appeal. As I mentioned before, the story of No Other Choice has already lived several lives. Donald Westlake wrote it in America as The Axe, a novel about the moral collapse of a downsized worker. Costa-Gavras adapted it in France as a dark social farce. Now, Park Chan-wook translates it into Korean, and in doing so, turns the material into something truly global. Because when the director remakes a film, he doesn't just swap languages, he recodes the DNA. His Korea isn't the neon metropolis of Old Boy or the central labyrinth of The Handmaiden. It's suburban, quiet, perfectly normal, the new front line of a social war. He takes a very Western narrative about capitalism but never aims to lecture you or discredit it. In fact, unlike many liberal players who will have you believe that competition, job stability, and the drive to provide are merely byproducts of capitalism, the filmmaker displays them as expressions of human nature itself, traces of evolution shaped by time. He then filters this through Korean manners, hierarchy, and etiquette. Here, politeness is violence with very good lighting. The humor comes from restraint, whereas the Western version might scream, Park's take whispers, where Hollywood would show the blood. Park shows the stain on the tie and the polite apology that follows. He's also the only director who could balance that tonal contradiction, the absurdity of competition, and the horror of losing face. It's no accident the movie's set far from Seoul. It's suburbs, not the skyscrapers, that show the real global crisis. Middle class people living on borrowed dreams. Culturally, the film's a perfect mirror. Europe's austerity hangover, America's job insecurity, Korea and Japan's workaholic anxiety, all trapped in one man's spiral. You realize the story is not about Korea at all. It's about us, wherever we are. If Costa-Gavras made the diagnosis, Park turns it into a morality play performed on KPIs and OKRs. But the whole movie strikes a chord on an even more personal front. Emotionally, no other choice really hits a very specific nerve, the quiet panic of being replaceable. Mansu's descent isn't just crime or desperation, it's coping. He treats murder like self care, the darkened version of the productivity seminar. Each act of violence is scheduled, rationalized, ticked off. It's mindfulness for the morally bankrupt. Park understands anxiety like few filmmakers do. His characters are always performing stability until they crack. Think of Decision to Leave, where desire hides behind etiquette. Here, that politeness becomes a pathology. The scariest thing about Mansu isn't that he kills people, it's that he still says thank you after doing it. Lee Byung-hun plays him with terrifying calm, a man trying to stay composed, whilst his own identity files for bankruptcy. Every breath is measured, every silence loaded. He's not evil, mind you. He's just exhausted. He's the ghost of the middle class, wandering the earth, clutching his CV. Watching the film feels like being in bad therapy. You recognize yourself in the patient and start to wonder if you're the one who needs help. And yes, the most uncomfortable laughs come from recognition. You watch him clean up a mess and think, yeah, I'd probably do that too. Maybe with less bleach. That's Parks' genius. He doesn't show monsters, he shows people rationalizing madness, and that hits closer than any horror jump scare could. This layer juxtaposes that condition with the self destructive impulses and blind obsessions that transcend any political affiliation. Yes, the lead often behaves like so many of his so called rivals, driven by a single goal to maintain the illusion of middle class privilege. But that too can be read as a modern day take on the old rule kill or be killed. The message is nothing new. We've seen it before in American satire, such as the 1970s version of Fun with Dick and Jane, its remake, and even more recently in Horrible Bosses. Yet the South Korean director manages to infuse the familiar premise with subtle symbolism, sharp panache, and a touch of absurdity as he gradually raises the stakes. The combination of the cultural and psychological context of the movie flows into the third highlight of this title, its relevance. We live in a time where work has become performance art. You're always pitching, networking, self optimizing, even when you're unemployed. No other choice is basically the best satire of the LinkedIn era we could ask for. Mansu's entire downfall begins because the system tells him to stay competitive. And he takes that advice, literally. Park skewers what I'd call resilience culture. Those hollow motivational phrases fail better, be your own brand, turn obstacles into opportunities. He just takes them at face value and follows them to their logical, bloody conclusion. That's what makes this film feel modern. It's not about economic inequality anymore, it's about psychological capitalism. The idea that even your personality has to produce value. The film drops into 2025's world of automation, layoffs, and endless self reinvention. In this context, Mansu isn't a relic, he is the future. The algorithm just hasn't automated his function yet. And to highlight this, there's that brilliant recurring gag where the lead is constantly exposed to positivity culture. books, slogans, and workplace seminars on staying positive and embracing optimism even in bleak circumstances. This aspect is highly mocked for its empty promises and illusion of advancement. There's a scene where Man Soo rehearses answers to an interview question alone in his car, the same way some people practice gratitude affirmations. He's still trying to optimize himself whilst his life burns down. And that's 2025 in a nutshell. Optimism weaponized to mask panic. You could say No, the Choice is, indirectly, the first great post AI workplace movie. A story about what humans do when they realize that machines may actually have better boundaries. It's the perfect film for an age where your job description changes faster than your conscience. The algorithms don't need to replace you, they just need you anxious enough to act like one. And the director doesn't point fingers. He just shows a world where morality has been outsourced to HR. And like every good satirist, he knows the more polite the society, the sharper the knife. In Park's world, nobody needs to tell you to do the right thing. Just log it into the system. Finally, the last reason this movie stands out is the direct result of the talent behind it. Every creative choice sharpened to a point. Most filmmakers treat social commentary like homework. Park Chan-wook treats it like a stand-up comedy routine. He isn't lecturing, he is heckling, and every cut is a punchline. He directs with the precision of someone conducting anxiety. Every camera move calculated, every edit timed to the heartbeat of discomfort. The humor in No Other Choice comes from recognition. Motivational quotes paced over despair, wellness apps promising serenity through competition, LinkedIn sermons written by people who haven't slept in days. And through it all, we find our lead, played by Lee Byung-hun, giving a masterclass in stillness. He doesn't perform breakdown, he performs containment. You can see the moral panic twitching behind every courteous smile. It's the kind of acting that turns exhaustion into tension. You laugh because he doesn't. Park and Lee understand that modern misery is absurd by design. The result is a movie that we laugh at not because it's funny, but because the alternative is crying and a job interview. And that's what separates Park from his contemporaries. He doesn't pity his characters, he audits them. He finds tragedy in comedy and dignity in failure. The absurd continuous presence of productivity seminars culminates into a third act that erupts into a literal bloodbath, and the irony lands like a punchline from Kafka. Even the offices and all the settings in which the action takes place look embalmed, grounds where ambition has been taxidermied. Park's world is cruel, yes, but recognizably ours. A place where competition never sleeps and morality files its own expense report. So in the end, No Other Choice isn't about capitalism or class, it's just about survival dressed up as ambition, and the terrifying ease with which we justify both. So there you have it, an American idea, a French film, and a Korean masterpiece about a universal truth. We'd rather lose our souls than our jobs. In my book, the movie hits all the right keys. The cultural one, because Park turns globalization into self-portraiture. The psychological side, because it feels like a panic attack in slow motion. The relevance, because it speaks to the absurd optimism of 2025 that coexists as an island with the notion of negative realism. And the brilliant execution, because it's still Park. Elegant, savage, and weirdly funny. No Other Choice might not save cinema, but it might save you from believing that success and sanity can coexist. One of 2025's finest titles, and yet another brilliant output from the fantastic South Korean movie industry.